The savage crime I'm going to discuss today involves levels of human depravity so extreme it strains one's faith in humanity. It details the prolonged systemic torture, rape, and murder of a teenage girl named Junko Furuta by a group of teenage boys in late 1980s Japan. I need to reiterate my strongest possible warning that the details of Junko's ordeal are exceedingly graphic and disturbing. If you are sensitive to extreme violence, sexual assault, or cruelty, I strongly advise you stop watching now. There is a reason Junko's case gained worldwide notoriety. What she endured represents the outer limits of human capacity for evil. As I comprehensively outline what befell Junko, please keep in mind the sheer intensity of agony and terror inflicted on such a young, innocent life. Her suffering stands as a stark reminder that true darkness lurks within the human psyche when moral constraints are abandoned. Junko Furuta was born in 1971 in Misato, Saitama, Japan. She was raised in a typical middle-class Japanese family with her parents and two brothers. She was known to be a good student who excelled academically. At the time of her death, Junko was a 17-year-old student attending high school in Saitama Prefecture. She worked a part-time job at a factory after school to save up money for a graduation trip she had planned. By all accounts, Junko was a popular, friendly, and virtuous girl who did not smoke, drink, or use drugs. She had good grades, rarely missed school, and was planning to start work at an electronics store after graduating. Her classmates and teachers saw her as an attractive, likable girl with a bright future ahead. One of Junko's classmates was an 18-year-old boy named Hiroshi Miyano. Miyano had associations with the Yakuza crime syndicate and saw himself as a gangster. He developed a crush on Junko and asked her on a date. When Junko politely declined his advances, Miyano was angered and insulted. As a relatively high-ranking member of the Yakuza in his community, Miyano was used to getting what he wanted. Junko's rejection humiliated him severely. To get revenge for this perceived slight, Miyano hatched a plan with his friends to teach Junko a lesson. Miyano's accomplices were also young Yakuza wannabes, eager to impress the higher-ranking gang members. This toxic mix of male pride, youth, and the power of the Yakuza created the perfect environment for what was about to happen. On November 25, 1988, Junko was riding her bicycle home from work when she was attacked by an unknown man and knocked from her bike. Coincidentally, Miyano happened to be nearby and intervened, chasing the assailant away. Presenting himself as Junko's savior and protector, Miyano offered to walk Junko the rest of the way home. In reality, Miyano had orchestrated the attack himself in order to play the hero. Instead of walking Junko home, he brought her to an abandoned warehouse where he revealed his Yakuza affiliations. Miyano then proceeded to violently rape and assault Junko repeatedly. After Miyano was done, he took Junko to a nearby hotel where two of his friends, Nobuharu Minato and Tetsuo Nakamura, were waiting. The three young men continued to rape and beat Junko throughout the night. Recognizing that Junko could identify them to police, the boys decided they could not let her go free. They threatened to kill Junko's family if she tried to escape and brought her to Minato's empty house to continue the abuse. What followed over the next 40 days was a living nightmare of constant torture, rape, and humiliation, from which death was Junko's only escape. The teenage boys unleashed unspeakable horrors upon Junko solely for their own entertainment and desires. Junko was repeatedly raped multiple times a day in all manners imaginable. Upwards of 400 men are believed to have sexually assaulted her during her ordeal. The boys forced Junko to pleasure herself at knife point for their amusement. In between rapes, the boys continually beat Junko with golf clubs, bamboo sticks, iron bars, and dumbbells. They degraded her by forcing Junko to stay naked, urinated on her, and mocked her ceaselessly. She was deprived of adequate food, water, and rest. When bored with beating Junko, the boys stuffed her into a freezer for hours on end. Her body was so battered that she lost control of her bladder and bowels. The horrendous cycle of pain continued without pause. To prevent detection, the boys forced Junko to pretend to be the girlfriend of one of her captors when Minato's family was home. The ruse did little to curb the ongoing abuse. Even some of Minato's relatives were aware of the captive girl being tortured. Minato's parents were too afraid of their son and his Yakuza connections to intervene on Junko's behalf. They also worried about damage to their reputation if word got out. Meanwhile, Junko's captors invited countless friends to participate in raping and abusing her. As the days passed, Junko's spirit diminished under the constant torture. Repeated head trauma caused her brain to shrink. She could hardly speak or move from the vicious beatings. Her body was rotting both inside and out from the abuse. On day 20, after having lighter fluid poured on her legs and set alight, Junko was no longer able to walk. When Junko's captors passed out drunk one night, she crawled to a phone and managed to call the police before being caught. No officers came to help. The boys punished Junko by torturing her with a lit candle for 2 hours, leading to convulsions. They continued to rape, burn, and beat her within inches of her life. Junko begged her tormentors to kill her, but they refused to let her escape the suffering. By day 40, Junko was completely degraded both physically and mentally by the endless torture. She could barely ingest food or water without vomiting. Her face was so disfigured as to be unrecognizable. Junko's left nipple had been torn off with pliers. Foreign objects were shoved inside her body cavities on a daily basis, causing severe internal trauma. Lighter fluid had been poured in her eyes and ears, nearly blinding and deafening her. On the 44th day, the boys challenged Junko to a game of mahjong, which she somehow won. Enraged, the boys beat her with an iron bar for hours and burned her legs to the bone for the last time. The next day, Junko finally succumbed to her injuries and died. After Junko's death, the panicked boys stuffed her body in a 55-gallon drum filled with concrete and dumped it at a construction site. However, some of Junko's hair was visibly poking out, leading to the barrel's discovery. Junko's parents were informed of what had happened to their daughter and fainted from shock. At the time, the boys' identities were protected as minors. However, journalists were eventually able to discover and publicly reveal their names. Once identified, Junko's captors were arrested and tried as adults due to public outrage. However, their sentences were extremely light given the severity of their crimes. The ringleader Hiroshi Miyano was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Accomplices Nobuharu Minato and Yasushi Watanabe received only 9 years. Another captor, Tetsuo Nakamura, was sentenced to just 7 years for his involvement. Many suspected the boys' Yakuza ties led to leniency. All 4 were released back into society after serving truncated sentences, seen by many as a grave injustice. The torture, rape, and murder of Junko Furuta represents one of the most extreme examples of human capacity for evil the world has seen. Over 44 nightmarish days, she was subjected to cruelty beyond comprehension for the depraved amusement of corrupted youths. Junko's case highlighted systemic problems in Japan regarding violence against women, juvenile crime, and inadequate sentencing for severe offenses. The public was rightly outraged at the short imprisonments given to those responsible for such an abominable crime. Junko Furuta's agonizing story stands forever as a reminder of the potential for darkness within mankind when moral constraints are abandoned.